Standing on the steps of West Orange Town Hall provides a perch from which we can glimpse back into some history along Main Street. But it wasn't all that long ago when things from this vantage point looked completely different. I still have vague recollections growing up in West Orange how it all once looked, as will many older residents. Let's take a look back at some of the changes brought to this area by urban renewal in 1966. The neighboring properties around West Orange Town Hall have all become familiar landmarks along the roads of home. However, only a generation or two ago, this area looked completely different. It can be said that West Orange Town Hall, which opened in 1937, is the sole survivor and eyewitness, in a sense, to a bygone era. The genesis of these changes actually can be traced to Title I of the Federal Housing Act of 1949, which was the beginning of urban redevelopment programs that would reshape many American cities and towns. Under the program, the federal government would pay two-thirds the cost of acquiring properties, while local governments paid the remaining one-third. Those sites where buildings were demolished was then turned over to private developers to construct new buildings. Locally, this was known as the Municipal Square Urban Renewal Project, under the authority of the West Orange Redevelopment Agency. The main objective was to replace older structures considered unsightly and revitalize the central business district downtown. Specifically, a sweeping change came to three aging buildings that formerly occupied the current-day property of 80 Main Street on the corner of Mount Pleasant Avenue. These buildings once stood in what now is the building's parking lot and cleared the land for today's contemporary modern office building. Perhaps the biggest eyesore removed from Main Street by the redevelopment project in 1966 sat just opposite White Street, diagonally across from Town Hall. It was the old hat factory building that first appeared on maps in 1890, but likely was built a few years earlier. The year of 1892 was celebrated as the 100th anniversary of the hatting industry in the Oranges, and business was still booming. In that year alone, a total of 21 factories employed over 3,700 workers and produced more than 4.7 million felt hats. The majority of these hat factories, however, were located in the Orange Valley bordering West Orange. By 1921, the hatting industry in the Oranges was struggling to survive, and only 5 hat factories remained. One of them was the West Orange factory, known for many years as the C.B. Rutan Company. In its final years before being demolished in 1966, it was known as the Stemple Hat Company. Just to the left of the hat factory, closer to the corner of Mount Pleasant Avenue, was the second building demolished in the urban renewal project where 80 Main Street now stands. It too was an older but smaller brick building and probably built years before the hat factory. Several types of businesses likely made use of this building over the years, but when it was torn down in 1966, it was being used to install automotive seat covers. Finally, the last of 3 buildings torn down in 1966 to make room for 80 Main Street was the Llewelyn Garage. This was a small white wood frame building that sat directly on the corner of Mount Pleasant Avenue across from Town Hall. It was used for automotive repair and at one time may even have sold gasoline. The sign on the door says closed today, but in reality it was closed forever when urban renewal also meant urban removal, as these buildings faded into oblivion. The office building located behind me at 80 Main Street now occupies the former site of those 3 buildings. But this corner on Mount Pleasant Avenue was not the only spot affected by urban renewal. The project actually began across the street from Town Hall in April 1966, when demolition first occurred on the properties of the former Erie Railroad Freight Yard and some homes bordering on White Street. This artist's conception, drawn in 1966, that was proposed for the building now standing at 59 Main Street, is completely recognizable as the office building that was actually constructed. This contemporary building marks the well-concealed actual spot where urban renewal began in April of 1966 in downtown West Orange, directly across from Town Hall on Main Street. The first building torn down was that of the Watchung Coal Company. It was one of many coal companies operating in the Oranges since the end of the Civil War in 1865. Watchung Coal had opened this office and coal yard in 1900 adjacent to St. Mark's Church. This ad from 1900 says Valley Road because at the time today's Main Street was then known as Valley Road. By 1966, coal yards were quickly becoming a thing of the past, and it had unfortunately become an aging eyesore right in the heart of downtown West Orange. The next to go was the old West Orange stockyards, which had been located here since the 1880s. The stockyards dated to a time before automobiles when horses were sold here and used in West Orange for transportation. By 1966, this business next to the Watchung Coal Company had long been abandoned, and the former stockyards were nothing more than decaying ruins. When they were torn down, it made way for the new building that was constructed at today's 61 Main Street. Some older homes bordering the northern end of the stockyards were also torn down as part of the urban renewal project of 1966. Prior to urban renewal, the Main Street area contained several aging and unsightly buildings which in their last year of existence only generated $26,000 in tax revenue for the town. The cost of restoring and saving them required a financial investment and a risk no developer was willing to make. It was estimated at the time, when urban renewal was complete, the new construction would generate 10 times the revenue stream prior to the demolition of the old structures. Making the best use of land and growing the tax base is the responsible course of action for any municipal government. Yes, all these buildings connected to the history of West Orange, but for all practical purposes, had outlived their usefulness. A new West Orange emerged from the aging ruins of a now well-concealed past, built upon the distant memories of a bygone generation, right here on Main Street.